Hello, hello, and welcome to Millennial Notebook. My name is Stella,
And my name is Emily.
and here we talk about living life as a millennial in the modern age.
Get comfy, grab your notebook, and let's enjoy the ride together.
Hey everyone! So today we have a very, very spicy and exciting topic. And yeah, I feel like Emily's gonna be grilling me on this one because she's only dated, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've only dated once, and this is with Jono, your current boyfriend. Or did you actually date people before that?
I mean, high school romances, really. So not really.
Not really dating.
No, I would say I was probably. I technically went out with a bunch of guys, but it was never physical, so
Okay.
I struggled to call
What?
it.
So is it only physical for you? Sorry, is it only dating for you if it's physical? Wink, wink.
I mean, I think so, especially when you're at that age. Like,
Oh, okay. Okay.
I mean, come on, you gotta.
Well, that's true. Cause
You gotta do something. Otherwise, what are you, friends?
yeah. Actually, good.
Unless you're asexual, obviously that's completely different. But
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Physically intimate. I think that's a good. I mean, for me, I think this differs per person, of course, and that's why I asked if that was the definition for you. But even for me, that's the biggest line that I set for what I would consider as a friend and who I would consider as someone I'd date, right?
Right.
I'd ask myself, would I be physically intimate with them, and is it okay for me to do that, right? And or do they
Yeah,
feel the same way?
yeah. Would you feel comfortable being physical with that person? Yeah.
Yeah, so most of the time it's been no for me, and so kidding. So my friends stay friends.
Yep. Friend zoned.
Oh no. Yeah, but okay, so today so we had an episode before where I talked about dating in Japan. So this is going to be different from that episode wherein I will be talking about dating in general and how to make dating less of a painful experience, because I've had so many dates, and the reason for this is because I wanted to be able to explore as much as possible and figure out what I wanted, what kind of person I wanted to date and be in my space. So it was like a big learning experience for me. And also, I didn't date in uni or even prior that. And so, yeah. And since I didn't date, when I became a full-fledged adult and, also moved out of my parents' house, like I wanted to be able to explore. And you know how there's some people that it just works out, like they meet one person, maybe like you, right? They meet one person, it works out, and then they're with them forever. And I have friends like that, and I'm so jealous of that, but I haven't I feel like I haven't found someone I would be willing to be in a relationship with. I mean, I did, but that didn't work out, right? So it's never worked out, and so I've had so many dates. So I'm very excited to just share that with our listeners today.
With the internet.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the biggest problem for people who are dating, and maybe you can tell me the problems that you feel like you would have experienced if you were still dating. But I feel like dating in general is tough, and it can be really awkward if you're not used to it. But what do you think about that, Emily?
I honestly don't know. I think for me, my relationships have always come via friends, and I think that's always the way it would have been.
Yeah.
If someone in the friend group, I mean, this has always been the way when I, liked guys, was I would see them as friend first, and then, things start to change, and someone might say something, and then they might do something that might change my mind and go, oh, actually you start texting a lot more, and that's kind of how feelings develop for me. So the idea of like jumping on an app and like messaging someone that you think looks or sounds like a good time
Yeah.
is just really odd to me. But also I've been in a long-term relationship for a long time, so for me it's kind of like, oh, that sounds exciting, I would love to do that, but I'm sure it's not that fun.
I mean, it's fun at first, and then you start to hit the slump, and then you're like, oh, this sucks.
Is it just because it's like the same thing again, or like, oh, I have to go on another date, or
Yeah. I think this is, I speak from personal experience, but I mean, I can't say the same for other people, but I feel like the more you do it and the more it fails, you just get jaded.
Right.
And so you start to lose hope, and that's when it starts to get a little bit tough. And yeah, you're right. It gets repetitive. And if you're an introvert, right, putting yourself out there and having to talk to people is kind exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
you're wasting all the energy for nothing. you
Yeah,
know?
and for someone, so my primary love language. If Are you familiar with the love languages, Emily?
Ooh, I am actually. I don't know what they are. I'm gonna look it up. Maybe this can be our
Okay,
little
let me
tidbit
tell
for
you.
today.
So,
Go for it.
the love languages are, so there are five. So there's quality time, acts
Ooh.
of service,
Oh,
physical
yes.
touch, gifts or presents,
Yep.
and words of affirmation or compliments, basically, or just words of love. So these are the top five that actually they're not the top five. You can have about top two love languages, and
Mm-hmm.
these are the ones that usually express and feel love the most. And the rest, of course, I mean, everyone has to some degree a percentage of the other remaining three after your top
Right.
two, but they're generally like a top one or two preferences that people have. And for me, quality time is my
Yep.
primary one, and I think it goes hand in hand with the fact that I'm very busy, and so time for me is very important and a limited resource. And I think people should
Yep.
start seeing time this way as well, because I mean, time is something that we'll never get back.
Yep.
You'll never know when you'll pass away, or another person who's important to you will pass away, and so it's very important where you allocate your time. And yeah, so very important to me. And so, like, it's exhausting, right? If you feel like, oh my god, I spent 3 hours with someone who I wouldn't even date and who wouldn't even become a friend, right? So that's what's
Right.
exhausting about it, really, personally. Yeah. So there, the love languages play a good role in whether or not a date or even a relationship would be successful. But to give you a
Right.
few other dating tidbits and facts, did you know that the top dating apps? So this is a worldwide study for this one, and this is from businessofapps.com. But the top dating apps are as follows, and I don't think this is from this. I don't think this is necessarily in ranking, but so the first one mentioned in this list is Tinder, then Bumble, then
Mm-hmm.
Badoo,
Mm-hmm.
Hinge, Happen, Grinder, Tantan, and Plenty of Fish. So I love
Interesting.
how we have representation for the LGBTQ community with Grinder here. But from what
Yes.
I'm familiar with, I usually hear most of my gay friends using this, and mostly it's for my male gay friends. I have never heard of any of my female gay friends, or, for example, for my friends who are bi or lesbian, use Grinder before. But maybe you could let us know in the comments if you are a lesbian or a bi and you've used Grinder before. I don't know.
I
But
think most people in those categories tend to use Bumble, but I could be incorrect. That might not be the status quo these days.
yeah, because they put there what they're looking for, right? That makes sense. Yeah.
Because
Okay,
you
that
can look
makes
for
sense.
friends on Bumble too, right? This is
Yeah, or not
dating.
just yes, you can, and also you can. I'm a female looking for females, for example. You can do that.
Right.
From what I'm familiar with Bumble, I don't know if it works the same with Tinder, but in any case, so these are the top dating apps apparently.
Mhm.
And the global dating app users has increased over time, and we're for example, in the year 2015, when I suppose most of the apps started getting released, there were 198 million users, and it jumped to 323 million in 2021. So that's a huge jump. And I do see the trend of people using apps more and more nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think back then there was a lot of shame in using this, but now it's kind of, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it's become a norm to some degree. Like you would hear people say, "Oh yeah, we met via dating app and they ended up getting married," right? So it's become
Yeah.
more of a norm. Although I'm
I
not
think
yeah.
I would say that's probably the number one way that most of my friends who have just met people,
Yeah.
like not random people, but just met people, has been through Tinder. Otherwise, it's been relationships through friends of friends. So,
Right.
yeah, it's definitely the option. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, there we go. And personally, I have dated mostly through dating apps, although I've also explored my friend group, and that didn't work out, as I've mentioned before, because I realized I would not get physically intimate with them, and so, okay, nope, that's not gonna work out. Yeah, so there you go. So how about we just jump into it? Like, what do you feel like dating? What do you feel like makes dating tough for you, Emily? Like, if you were to just jump into dating.
Definitely being an introvert. That's that's an issue. I don't know. It's hard to say because I don't really think about it, right? I don't really think. I think probably the toughest thing, which is kind of adjacent to dating, but it would just be getting over my last relationship. I think that's the thing that is probably the one thing that puts a barrier in front of it for me.
Right.
And sort of my lack of experience, with physical stuff outside of my current relationship. That's probably my biggest worry is like, I've only really had one person's feedback before.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if I'm good.
You're so funny. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, I personally am going through this still, getting over my last relationship and then just putting myself out there again. And I feel like one of the best ways to get yourself ready for the next relationship, or maybe to just date again, right, would be to let yourself heal and mourn for that relationship, because there is a study that a broken heart actually feels just as painful as a physical injury. So it's a real pain. Even though it's mental, it feels very painful for the people experiencing it. And so you just let yourself mourn the relationship and the loss of that. And there is also that aspect of like, so if you're going to get physical, make sure you're ready for it. If you are, if you're still a little bit like antsy about having other people touch you after your previous relationship, then perhaps it's not a good time to jump into the next relationship. And there's a lot of, I feel like, self-reflection that is necessary before you jump into dating again after a relationship, or else you'll end up going on a rebound, or maybe even hurting the other person because you're not ready. I mean, of course, it can't. People go through their mourning process very differently. Some people like to jump into the next relationship immediately, and that's fine. Just make sure that you don't that you are in a good space before you jump into that, so that you don't end up hurting the other person. Are my 2 cents on that. On the getting physical bit, getting feedback. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can just think about this like how you do with work, right? Like you you try something out, and then you ask them, so how do you like that? And then and not at that moment, right? But like you have a post-processing session.
Right. I mean that's normal, right? I mean, I would say it's normal, but
yeah.
That should be normal is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
To sort of, break it down. But yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, like asking for feedback, I feel like it's very. I mean, I'm learning this now in my, more and more nowadays, where especially as a
Mm.
woman, right? It's very difficult to. So we're gonna talk about like intimacy, right? Like it's very, especially when you get in the sheets. Like there's a
Mm.
statistic about how women have a harder time getting there versus men, right? And
Yep.
it takes a
Yeah.
lot of communication on your part, regardless of whether you're male or female, just knowing yourself and what you like, and also finding the strength to express that to the other person. Easier said than done.
Mm.
Make sure that you both feel like you're in a safe space to talk about this
Yeah.
before jumping into it, right? Because you don't want to really hurt anyone. But yeah, communication is very important. So
Yeah, it's funny how something so physical is actually a lot more about words than it is the act.
yeah.
Like it's a lot about communicating what works for you, and yeah, you have to
Yeah.
do that with words sometimes.
Yeah, very important.
Maybe diagrams.
Diagrams. Oh my goodness, that'd be funny. I would never.
Imagine if you went on a date and just before you even started the physical stuff, you're just like, hang on, now let me get up my presentation.
This
So
is who I
this
am.
is
This is who I like.
this is me.
Oh
This
my
is what I
God.
like.
That's so funny. Oh my
This
goodness.
is how it works. Are we on the
Okay.
same page? Okay, cool. Let's jump into it.
Okay, so now that you're there, I think a lot of our listeners, or maybe people who are listening to this particular episode, are wondering, how do you even start? And how do you not make it feel so awkward? Especially as an
With the
introvert,
physical
right?
stuff or like just the
Just
dating in
dating
general?
thing in general, right? Because you mentioned, I asked you, like, what do you think is the toughest thing for you with this one? And you mentioned introversion, right, a while ago, like as an
Yep.
introvert. And I feel like
Yeah.
social situations for introverts are, in general, very tough.
Yep.
And okay, so, and I'm an introvert myself, so feel at ease, my fellow introverts, as I have.
Yes. Oh, we have words for wisdom.
Yeah,
We're
we
words
have
of wisdom for you. I actually have one in my mind, so I'll
Yeah,
let you
okay.
speak and then
Okay,
I'll jump
okay.
into it.
Okay, great. So, I mean, this took a lot of dates and years of practice. So, you can trust me on this. But you can so how to start? So, number one, just meet someone, whether that's through your friends or through an app. However, you meet this person, just find, once you've found that person that you want to go on a date with, you go on that date. And when you're on that date, I suggest that you prepare a bunch of questions ahead of time. So I think this doesn't really differ from the tips that I gave from our introversion talk, which is episode 2, meeting people as an introvert. If you're curious, have a listen. But it's mostly just, getting to know that other person and being genuinely interested in getting
Yeah.
to know about their life and who they are. And this isn't regardless of whether you're actually interested. And I would be wondering why you would even be going on a date if you're not interested in asking the other
Exactly.
person. Unless you're in it for just sex, right? And that's totally fine.
But I mean, even still, you've still got to have some kind of chemistry even to sleep with someone, right?
That's true. I don't know. I've only.
I mean, some people have different standards, but I would just be like, oh God, I cannot get over the way you sound. You sound like a moron. This is not sexy. I'm out.
Actually, yeah. I mean, I think.
Because for women, it's a lot in your head, right? So
Yeah.
if someone, like, if you got in the sheets with them, like you said, and then they started dirty talking in this, like, really awful voice, I'd be
Yeah.
like, I'm out. I can't do this.
my God.
No, not interested. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's really, yeah, and that's a good point because, like, I also have a friend who's not into dirty talk in bed, whereas for me, I mean, TMI to users, but I actually like dirty talk. So yeah, I mean, there are also that. It's not, I don't recommend that you talk about that on your first date, but just getting to know them as a person is one of the best ways to kind of remove the tension from there because you're asking questions and it kind of eases the pressure off of you. And by asking questions, it leads to a lot more of like rapport building or rather bouncing off of each other. And we would hope that your date asks you questions as well.
Yeah.
Because
It's a good conversation if it goes both ways. There's nothing worse than asking
Exactly.
questions and one person just talks. But sometimes for an introvert, that's kind of, it's we talked about a while ago, putting the ball in their court, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, if you don't feel comfortable talking about yourself or in the situation, then you can basically be the one to ask the questions. And you
Yeah.
can keep asking questions. But, if they're, they'll throw back a question at you, hopefully, and that's good rapport. But then you can throw a question back at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And my other tip is just to not see them as your date per se, but as a new person you're getting to know, much like when you're meeting possible new friends, right? Because I feel like a big barrier for some people, especially those who are new to the dating scene, is that, oh my god, I'm going on a date. This guy or this guy or girl might possibly be my next relationship if this goes well. Like, you overthink it. And the more you think about it, and the more you hype yourself for the date, the more you get anxious, and the more it feels awkward once you're there, right? So just kind of easing off the pressure from your own shoulders by just letting yourself see this as a getting to know you session of another person, right? Versus like something that you feel like could be a huge thing, because it's just a casual meetup if you think about it that way. You're just literally meeting someone who you met from somewhere else, and then getting the opportunity to talk to them one-on-one.
So can I ask, for example, if you met someone through an app, how much time do you spend actually texting that person? Or is it just kind of like, oh, I like you, let's meet up, and then you have the conversation? Or do you kind of feel it out first?
Yeah, okay, so good question. Personally, I don't like texting, but if you're gonna meet someone from an app, it's very important to have that conversation to build up toward the date. Especially, I mean, I don't want to even say especially if you're a guy trying to talk to a girl, but like, girls really don't like it when you send them like a pic of your D and then expect them to be like,
which you should do anyway.
What?
unless it's asked for, that is a no-no.
Yes, exactly. Don't do that. So just guys, we don't want pics of your D unless we ask for it. So don't send them.
No one asked for that. At least they asked for it.
Yeah, so definitely a conversation leading up toward the date is important. Also because not just because we want to build we want to figure out whether we're compatible in that sense. That's one. It's figuring out whether you're compatible or whether you'd even enjoy the date, right? And that's one.
Right.
And the second thing is kind of like, I guess it's also a way to figure out if your tempos match, right? Because someone who is let's say someone who's very antsy and wants replies immediately will not meld well with someone who is, for example, like me, who doesn't like to text that much. And it's a good way to just kind of understand whether or not you'd be able to make it work, right? So that's that. And then building up to the date, right? So there's no real rule here who should ask who when you're going on a date. But I mean, I don't know, because I have a friend who personally wants to wait out. She's a girl, and she, after several years and several relationships, she realized that she wants the other person to be more interested. And so she sees interest as having the other person ask her out on a date. So she will not ask someone on a date. For me, it's a mix. I would really appreciate it if the other person... So I am a straight female. And so I would like it for the guy to ask me out first.
Yeah.
Just because in my experience, like when I try to ask them out on the date, I feel like even on very progressive apps like Bumble, I don't know, I feel like I can't really, I shouldn't chunk all people in one box, because I ended up asking the guy who I dated for a while, and it ended up being a really good relationship until it ended, right? But I think I asked him out for coffee. So I was the one who asked. So there's no like answer to should I ask him out or her out.
Yeah.
So just let it go through the flow, right? For example, you end up talking about something you're passionate about. Like, let's say for me, it's hiking or coffee. Then it's a natural progression toward the date, right? It's like, okay, we should go out for coffee next time. I have this really nice cafe that I know. And then
I mean, that's a really good tidbit, right?
Yeah.
Of like if the conversation progresses in a certain way, like, oh my god, I'm really excited about that new movie coming out.
Yeah.
Perfect date opportunity, and be like, oh man, it'd be cute if we went together. Wink, wink. And it's like a little bit of flirting, and you throw that in there, and I mean, Jonathan and I still do that, which is kind of funny.
Oh, it's cute.
Because we have date nights now, because he's out of town, so we try and make an effort. And if there's something we want to watch or go and see, we're just like, oh, it's a date. Make it an opportunity. But if there's like an exhibition you want to go and see, and the other person likes art or whatever it is, maybe there's a shop you want to go and see. I don't know. Like, find that commonality and then make that a date opportunity. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And it works just as well for someone you're trying to go on a date with.
It
Because
also works for friends too. Just saying.
sorry, say that again.
It works for friends too. Like, if you want to befriend someone, that's the best way to do it.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not just dating, but friends too.
Yeah.
Because finding new friends is kind of like dating, though, right?
That is true. And we circle back to what we said a while ago. Just see them as a new person you're getting to know, because literally
Exactly.
that is it. Right.
Because you might come out with a friendship. Like, that's the best part, right?
Yeah. I sort of kind of ended up being friends with someone I matched with on Tinder a long time ago. And I don't know, because I couldn't understand his intentions, because like, he was living in the States, I'm living in Japan. And I mean, we had good rapport.
Right.
We could have dated if he stayed in Japan much longer, but he wasn't. And I think he got the idea that I wasn't into casual relationships when we met. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know. And then we just ended up talking a lot while he was in the States already. And then, like, it fizzled out. And then he came back to Japan. He was just like, hey, we should hang out. And I was just like, okay. Then we went on dinner. He asked me out to dinner. We split the bill, which I assumed was just like, okay, we're just friends now. And like, I don't
Interesting. So if he paid for the bill, would that be your sign to be like, oh, okay?
I think this is a very
Is it a chauvinistic thing?
I think this is
like
a personal.
The guy showing his.
I wouldn't want to put that there, because I rather than seeing it as a chauvinistic thing, I'd like to see it as chivalry for some, like, if they offer to pay for the date, right? But this is very personal. Some girls.
It is. Yeah. Some women like to be equal.
Yeah. So especially if you're coming from a culture where, from what I'm familiar with Northern European countries, people from I have friends from Finland, for example, who say that they definitely split the bill. I have another friend who has been dating in Denmark, and she said the same thing. And guys don't, females, like girls and guys don't expect one to pay for the other. It's literally like equal. But I mean, coming from an Asian country, from the Philippines, with we do have Spanish influences, and so like just a sign of interest from guys would be, paying for the date. So that's just a personal thing.
Interesting.
Like, if they offered, I mean, I will pay for the date. I will offer to pay for it, of course, for my own half. But there are guys who insist, and so if they insist, even after I offer, then I'd just let them do that, and I'd be very appreciative and be very thankful.
I think I'm in the same boat, where it's like, I would always offer. Well, not offer. I would always be like, I'm paying for my part of the bill, obviously. But if someone, guys are really, I mean, Jonathan does this. We go on a lot of double dates with friends, and because he now has a job, so I guess his love language is, I don't know if it's gifts or acts of.
I could see either of that. For sure.
Yeah, it's one of those two, but he loves paying for the bill. Like, that's his, like, yeah, I'm the man. Like, I pay for the bill.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
It's quite funny. Oftentimes someone will just, it's always like a thing of who gets to the till first.
Yeah.
And it must be a male thing. Well, no, not necessarily. I think it's a Kiwi thing where, like, if you've got the ability to pay for the meal, you go and do it in secret, and you just go and do it. You just like, okay, I'm gonna pay for the bill because I don't want any like dramas at the till. Goes and pays for it. It's all sorted. It's done.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a bit of a fight to, like, some friends are like, oh, we want to pay for the bill because you paid for it last time, and then it becomes this little, a little bit of a merry-go-round. So, yeah. But like if a guy was like, "Oh, I'll pay for your meal," I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, cool."
Right.
Go ahead. But I'd never expect that, I guess is the thing.
Me too. It's the same. And actually, I never expect that one, and I will always offer to pay too.
Yeah.
But also, like, I feel like this is also one of my ways, unspoken ways. I think this is a very Asian thing. I have never really dated much in the West or anywhere else aside from Asia. But another way for me to kind of unspokenly express my disinterest is to be very explicit about paying for my own half.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I think it works in Japan to some degree because people are forced to have that indirect communication style because it's the culture here, regardless of nationality or ethnicity. But I wonder how that would work out. For example, in New Zealand, I don't know.
What if you were just explicitly like, "I'm paying"?
Yeah, I'm paying.
Like it wouldn't set the same expectation of being like friend zoned. I'm paying.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
I don't know.
For-
I think here, if you were insistent about paying, I think that is saying that you're an independent woman and I don't need you, but I would like to spend time with you regardless. It's just kind of, I think that's how it comes off here. If you're just like, I'm paying for my own bill, thank you very much. It's
Right.
I am independent, first and foremost.
Interesting. I feel like there are
But we can still date.
I feel like there are cultural aspects to this as well, right? Because I don't know how well that would, because like the machismo aspect of some guys here as well would be like, oh my god, intimidating, bye. So not that but that's also cultural, right? So I don't want to go into that because these are personal things and it will vary per person. But just figure out what your expectations are, I guess. Like, because for me, it would be nice if they offered to pay, insisted to pay, because I feel like that's an expression of interest and love, as you've mentioned a while ago.
Yeah.
So just figure out what your values are, what you want to kind of put out there is one of the bigger things that I think you should also figure out when you are going out on dates. On that end, though,
so how do you say you're not interested? Is this pre-date, post-date, chatting?
Yeah, I think
when do you say you're not interested? Do you wait for the first date? Do you just have a text chat and you're like, this isn't working?
Yeah,
you have to see them in person.
Okay,
like, what is it?
Good question. So I think I've been able to identify that I'm not interested at almost all of the stages that you've mentioned. So pre-first date, during or after the first date, and after maybe the second or third date. So so first, sometimes you figure out that you're not interested in them, right? Because of the way they answer questions or the way they don't actually ask you questions back. It's just like a monologue between like just him and you, and him mostly talking, for example, or them, sorry, if whoever you're dating. But sometimes you can figure out from there that you're not compatible or that you don't want to keep the conversation going. And so for me, I mean, there are two ways to go about this. Depending on I wouldn't recommend ghosting because especially if you've had a long conversation and they're expecting a reply. If it's a very short conversation, right? Like you've only exchanged like 3 messages and they were barely responsive, I feel like that's a good pass for just ghosting away because there's barely anything there.
I wouldn't necessarily call that ghosting, though.
I would say... What is defined as ghosting, then?
I think ghosting is where there's actually been effort put in. I mean, I could be wrong, but this is the way I see it. If there's effort been put in, if it's like you guys have been chatting for 3 days straight and then suddenly gone, that I would see as ghosting. After 3 messages and they don't really respond, that's just kind of like, okay, that's never going to work.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Okay, because
ghosting is when you're like... I think there has to be like an emotional component of like investment in time and like it's just suddenly out of nowhere.
So I googled the definition, and as a noun, ghosting is the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation withdrawing from all communication. I think the point here is a personal relationship with someone, right?
Right. I wouldn't say 3 messages is a relationship.
Okay, great. So because
So I wouldn't feel bad, is what I'm saying. About if someone after 3 messages you ghost, like I wouldn't worry.
yeah. Okay, great. Because I would feel bad about that. Because I am against ghosting, just because I don't like. My primary value in my life is kindness, and so I strive to be kind in all situations, even when people are unkind to me. And so ghosting is not my thing, but like sometimes, you've only exchanged 3 messages and he wasn't even replying that well. I'm just like, bye.
Yeah.
So great. That makes me feel better. Okay, so
Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad.
Yeah. So if it's been like 3 or 4 messages and there wasn't a connection, I think you can just like fade away from it. If you've had more conversations, for example, I've had matches where they're very expressive, they communicate a lot, and they seem very interested, but I lost interest for whatever reason. Whether it's the way maybe their values that showed in their responses, or I don't know, whatever it is, and they still seem interested, and we've had some level of kind of communication investment there, right? Then what I do there is I give them a short message explaining like, hey, sorry, you seem really nice, and I had a really good conversation with you, but I am not feeling this, and so I'm sorry. I hope you find what you're looking for. Thank you and goodbye. Kind of
So polite.
very,
So polite.
I mean, I feel like it eases the pain for the other person, because
Yeah, for sure. 'Cause you don't even know what they've got attached to either. They might see it's something more than it is, and I guess that's
yeah,
better
because
than not knowing.
exactly, because sometimes people get very invested early on, and that's fine. I've been through that stage as well. I think I've learned to not hold on so tightly after several failed dates like this. And so sometimes but you never really know, right? But it's good to communicate what you're expecting before you disappear. So no ghosting anyone, please. If you gotta do it, make sure they're a jerk or a terrible person.
Yeah.
But even then, right? But yeah.
So what happens if you've gone on the first date and you're like, this isn't gonna work? Do you tell them in person in the date, or do you message them afterwards?
Okay.
It's a tricky one. I feel like you need to like let the first date settle.
Yeah. I agree 100%. That's why I don't usually say on the first date.
Imagine that. This is nice. Thanks for paying for my meal, but this isn't gonna work. Bye.
Or like, this was nice. I'm gonna pay for my own meal. Goodbye.
Now you make them pay for it.
No, oh my gosh, terrible. Gosh, I don't want the guilt of that, because
I could never do that to someone. I feel
you are so
bad.
funny. I mean, you do you, right? But yeah, I think I usually let the first date settle in. You're absolutely right. I think about it, like, even if I'm not feeling it on the first date, which is totally possible. Like, for example, I mean, I wouldn't call it catfishing, but the vibe is different. Or sometimes
they
look
could be nervous.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But, sometimes, like, even if they're nervous, it's just the rapport isn't there.
Right.
Even
There's no chemistry.
Yeah, because it's very different when you're texting versus a real life conversation, right? There's less time to think about what to say. So, and also like there's this basic thing called, you mentioned it, chemistry, where sometimes you just have it, sometimes you don't. It's really hard to explain. Or, sometimes their photos end up looking different from how they are in real life. Just because maybe some, people tend to choose their best photos sometimes. Or sometimes it could go the opposite end where they choose really bad photos and they end up looking really good, which is great.
Take you by surprise, yeah.
Yeah, but I let it sit. And I usually end up, if they end up texting me after the first date, because normally kind of both parties feel it out, right? And if the other person texts you saying, hey, I had a great time, I would love to see you again, and that's the cue I take to send a short message, which is exactly the same message that I would send prior to the first date if I find out that I don't like them. Is exactly like that, right? I'm sorry, I had a great time, but I don't think you're what I'm looking for, blah blah blah. Just a short and simple message to explain why and then say goodbye. And it's been really good for me. I feel like, I think it's better than ghosting, really. I feel like it's terrible to just leave a person hanging when they're obviously really nice. I mean, some people will kind of argue against that because it's just one date, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say it again. Personal thing, I'd rather leave people feeling okay about a situation rather than leave them feeling scarred about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I usually text. I mean, you can choose to ghost because it's only been a date, but if they text you repeatedly, I feel like it would be a respectful thing to just say that I'm sorry, it's not working out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Same for the second and third date. Yeah, sometimes if you've gone that far to say a second and third date and then you realize, this isn't working out, sometimes you owe them. I mean, I wouldn't say you owe them, but it would be nice if you give them a
It's
longer,
respectful.
a longer text message, maybe, because you're not dating, you're not exclusive yet, so I don't think it necessarily calls for a face to face.
Right.
Yeah.
First date? Nope, not gonna work out. So on the second date, we'll break up. Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. No, because sometimes you can give them another chance, like, right, and figure out if
maybe.
you like it. But for these things, I think a good conversation, a good text message explaining why would be good. Like, for example, hey, sorry, like, I'm looking for this kind of person, ABC, and I feel like this part just wasn't working out for me. And so even though I think you're a great person, I don't think this is going to work out. Thank you, kind of thing. Yeah. But I also would like to express that if you've gotten intimate in any point between the second and third date or even the first date, whether it's emotionally intimate or physically intimate, I think before you break up, regardless of whether you were exclusive or not, if you've gotten intimate, I think they deserve a conversation in person. And that's right. Just because it's gotten intimate, right? And you weren't, it's not a casual relationship, right? By casual, as in you didn't, it's not a one night stand.
Right.
And if you've gotten right, like emotionally intimate and also physically intimate, and then you just go up and say sorry, bye, like it leaves the other person scarred and scorned, right? Like why'd you do that? Like I thought, right? Like I feel like it deserves a conversation because they'd end up wondering what had happened.
It definitely deserves a conversation. I just wonder if face to face is necessary. But I guess as long as you talk about it. I think that's the main message,
so
right?
I backtrack on the face to face thing. I guess that's a personal thing, but yeah, just a conversation.
Yeah.
I think if you've been intimate in any way, I think you should give that other person the right to a conversation at least.
Yeah.
To say that you're not interested or that it's not working out for whatever reason, just so that they understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the opposite of that, I guess, is how do you keep them coming back? I mean, that's a hard one, right?
Keeping them interested. Okay.
Yeah, like it depends on the rest of the relationship, would it not?
Yeah. So you are right on the dot there. So it depends on the person, actually, and this is why I think a good general answer would be to just keep communicating with them. A good texting tempo is good for keeping them interested, I'd say, because especially with online dating or just generally dating as an adult, right? Like people get busy with work, with their lives, and if you stop communicating with them, then they're gonna think that you're not even gonna invest in this new relationship, whatever this is, right? Because even with your friends, right, you text sometimes, you're like, hey, how are you doing? Or even if you don't text, like for example, a lot of my friends and I, we're not texters, and so usually we use text as a platform to set up another date.
Right.
Or if it's not a date, like we call all of our friend dates as just dates, but just hanging out, right? Set up hangouts. Yeah. So if you're not gonna keep texting, at least make sure to kind of set up dates in between, so that you know that you're gonna have something in the future, in the near future, is a good way to keep them interested. Because if you don't, then they're just gonna assume that you're not interested, and therefore they themselves would get disinterested.
And the other thing too is they might, if you might not have discussed whether or not you're exclusive, but it gives them the option, I guess, if you ghost or not communicate, for them to go and
Date other people.
meet other people, and that could upset you. So
Yeah, exactly. Actually, like, it's very, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this later, but you can't really assume that you're exclusive until you have that conversation.
yeah,
And yeah, and that's why,
especially in today's world where it's really easy to meet people too, where you
Yeah.
probably have like 3 or 4 different people. I mean, I don't know, it depends on the person, but yeah.
exactly. So I think this is why it's important to keep communicating. And if you're not a texter, again, I meant just set up dates, and to just keep asking questions, right? Like, how was your day? Very specific questions. Like, I think there are some types of questions that would make it very boring to, depending on the person, to reply, like very typical questions, right? So you kind of feel it out, like see what they respond to, and just ask those kinds of questions, right? What did you eat today? Or like, if that's boring for the other person, like see whatever they respond to, and then you keep the tempo going. But yeah, I feel like
I have a question for you.
Yeah?
How many people do you tend to talk to at once?
okay, that's tough, cause I
I assume it's personal
Yeah.
for everyone, right? Depending on what they
Yeah,
can
yeah,
handle,
exactly.
or-
Because there are some people who can juggle a lot of people at once without any problem. Personally, because I don't like texting, I think, I get, it exhausts me. And
Yeah.
because of that, I have a hard time balancing a lot of people at once, especially, let's say, in the context of texting a lot of people at once, regardless of whether I met them through a dating app or other people. But I think the most I can manage all at once would be 3.
Interesting.
3 at once. And personally, because I think I'm learning more and more nowadays that it's very hard for me to balance several people at once. So actually, if I find someone I'm very interested in, I may end up kind of focusing on that person and end up with one person at the end. But I heard from studies that this is actually a tendency that females end up doing, where guys who date, especially on dating apps, there was a study on this. Guys would end up swiping right on majority of the women, whereas women would end up swiping at least just once out of several potential matches.
Interesting.
Swiping right is saying yes, by the way, if
Yeah.
for those who are not familiar. So yeah, personally, I can only do a maximum of 3 at once. Not that I'm counting, but I think that's how it's worked out for me.
Yeah. You meet your quota. I've met 3, no more. You'll have to wait for the slot to open.
Yeah, but oh my goodness, it's funny though, because I kind of like, once I hit 3, at least, right, a maximum of 3, I usually like I snooze my matching function. So because I can't handle
interesting.
anymore. Imagine trying to balance 3 people and trying to talk to them all at the same time.
You could have a date every night. You could go out with Jerry on Monday, go out with John on Tuesday.
I have a friend who is an extrovert and who is a social butterfly, and who, she also, to be fair to her, she also got out of a divorce, and she is ready for, her dating life and to just meet new people. And so she was balancing, like, if I'm not mistaken, at least 5 people at once, and all in one day. Like,
Oh, wow.
you mentioned
all
like John
dates?
on Monday, like Gary on Tuesday, whatever, but she was just like, John at breakfast, Gary at lunch. What other
So the
names
best
do we
one
know?
goes last, right?
What?
So you have dessert with Tom.
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
Tom gets seconds for his dessert.
Yeah, and then like
If it goes well.
yeah, and then afternoon tea with Thomas.
Oh my
And
god, how
then
much coffee would you drink? I'd just be like buzzing by the
and then dinner with, yeah, like that's how she was. I found it very
Wow.
interesting. I'm just like, whoa, I cannot.
I would need time to like process that many people. Like, you'd be like, okay, but John said this. Oh, but then Tom's, which one? No, one of them said that. You'd be so confused. I'd lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I can't do that. So that's me, maximum. But on that note, right? Like, I think some people are wondering also, like, and I had to go through this question before, like, how to not get attached. And before this episode started, Emily actually asked me what this question meant, and she was just like, shouldn't this be phrased differently? And
I can't remember what I said. I think I said not how to not get attached, but like, yeah, no, I don't know what I said, but yeah, no, it's an odd thing to like Google or
yeah, but
ask or phrase it that way.
you'd be surprised, like, a lot of people ask this question because it's one of Google's top searched questions for dating
Wow.
and relationships.
There you go.
And I think the reason why is because nowadays, and you mentioned it a while ago, it's getting easier and easier to meet more people because of the way we're with the internet. And because it's not just even with dating apps, right? Let's say meetups. You can go to at least one meetup per week or even more if you wanted to. Like, there's just so many ways to meet people now. And
especially if it's a big city where lots of people are busy roaming around. Yeah,
exactly. And because of that, right, you can't really assume that you're together until you have that conversation. And I think this could vary per culture, of course. But I think it's fair to say that, you can't really assume until you talk about it, right? That, okay, what is this? Are we together? And with that, like, it's best to just keep yourself emotionally safe by not getting too attached until you have that conversation, because you never know that they might be talking to 5 other people
yeah,
and going on dates with 5
dates
other people. Yeah. Yeah.
One day.
And it's fair territory unless they're cheating on someone. Like, I do not support cheating. Do not cheat if you're in a relationship. So I'm talking about single people balancing other single people. And so my answer to that is, after much reflection and a lot of therapy, is to just first, one, take it slow and get to know them, because they might not be who you're even imagining them to be, actually. Because a lot of, according to my therapist, the attachment comes from idealizing the person and putting them on a pedestal, right? And you're like, no, this is the best person that I will ever meet, and so I have to cling on to them because I will never find anyone better. So sure, maybe they're the best for now, but then how much do you really know them to be able to say that they're the quote-unquote best person to ever appear in your life, right? So take it slow, like, really get to know them and not try, like, our brain has a tendency to fill in the blanks. And so sometimes it's some people kind of like to, and this is how a lot of players, there's a book for this and I despise that book, but some players like to put in blanks for you to fill in. And so a lot of people kind of fill in those blanks with their own assumptions and then make the idealized person.
Right.
So yeah, just see them for who they are. And for example, if they tell you that they're not ready for a relationship, believe them, because they're introducing themselves to you. And so if they're not ready for a relationship and you want a relationship, then perhaps it's best to not get attached to this person.
Yeah,
so,
stay away.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one. Second, have other hobbies and interests that keep you busy, so you're not so focused on that other person. So I feel like when, like, people start to get attached when they're focusing on that singular person,
right,
for too long. And when you focus, right, of course, that you're like, okay, this is the person. And you think of there's a tendency to overthink what they text you or what they say or what they're doing. And so
I mean, the same thing happens within relationships too.
Really?
Like oh yeah, for sure. Like, sometimes you get like a bad thought in your head and it'll just derail the whole relationship.
Would you say
So
that
it
this
happens.
tip helps even for that? Like keeping yourself busy?
Um,
What would you do if you were like in
I
your
don't know, because
perspective?
you've got to be really careful, right? So there's,
Yeah.
am I keeping myself busy to distract myself from the issues in my relationship,
Mm-hmm.
or am I bored and making issues out of nothing
Mm,
because
that's a
I'm
good point.
bored?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is definitely something that is an issue. If you have a overstimulated brain or an understimulated brain, it likes to just, run little hamster wheels. So I think you just have to. I think if you kind of get into that point, that's where you've got to communicate, and
Mm.
that usually clears up a lot of things. But yeah, overthinking is something you've got to be careful of doing.
Right. That's fair. I think I agree with that completely. You have to also be able to understand your own reactions and why you are.
Yes. Yeah.
Because maybe, for example, you're seeing red flags, right? And then you're like, okay, let me not think about that and do my other hobby. So that's not
Yeah.
good.
Let me just distract myself, because those aren't really red flags, are they?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
make sure you reflect on that as well. But like, just make sure you're not focusing on them too much because that's when the attachment starts to come, right? Because you're like,
Mm.
okay, this person, 100%. When's my next date with this
Mm.
other person? I'm so excited. Like, when your whole world starts to revolve around that other person, is, I feel like, when the attachment grows to a level that is harder to control.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I guess my last tip for this one is to pace yourself and remember that you're, as I mentioned a while ago, that you're not exclusive until you have that conversation. So, because
Not exclusive until there's a contract.
yeah, yeah. Sign it, bitch.
Sign the prenup.
No, but then I feel like I think this is a common thing that me and my friends had gone through, that sometimes it's very easy to assume that they're not seeing other people based on
Mm.
the fact that, say, you hang out a lot, or
Yeah.
the fact that they're introverted and that of course they wouldn't be seeing other people, blah blah blah. Like, it's
Mm.
very easy to assume things and then get carried away from that and get attached because you're assuming that you are exclusive.
Yeah.
But remember that, you don't really know the other person until you have that conversation, because you can't really assume and expect that, right?
Yeah.
Because what if they're introverted but still wanna explore a lot, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, just pace yourself, because
Yeah.
you never really know until you have that conversation. And
Yeah.
finally, manage your expectations.
Yeah.
Because expectations are actually one of the primary, according to my therapist, primary. I mean, it doesn't really, I wouldn't say it ruins relationships, but it kind of shakes up specific relationships, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships. When
Mm.
you expect and these expectations are not communicated, um,
Yeah.
or if the expectations were communicated and they weren't really followed up on, just in general, if you're gonna
Mm.
have expectations, then make sure you communicate them.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're not communicating them and you're still expecting, then perhaps you may reconsider whether you're having a fair expectation, or whether you want to have this expectation and want to communicate that with that other person. Because if you don't communicate it and you expect it and then you don't get it, then that's when things go haywire.
Things. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a cultural thing too, like cultural expectations,
Mm,
growing up in different situations, your expectation of your partner might be different in your country versus perhaps their country, or even just like different home life experiences too. So
exactly. Oh, that's a
they can
good
make a huge
thing.
difference.
That's
Like,
very
if you,
good.
yeah, if your parents communicated in a certain way, but their parents communicated in a different way, then that's usually how you expect your relationship to go. And if you have different expectations, it's just kind of, I think that does come through the conversation as well. You kind of expect to learn those sorts of things through conversation, and like I guess that's something if you wanted to think about what topics you wanted to talk about or like what to seek out in your conversations with a potential partner. I guess it's family's a really interesting one because that tends to lay a lot of morals and values for people. So
Yeah.
just my little 2 cents there.
Yeah, I think that's a great input. And
Yeah.
and actually, if you don't manage them, that's when you tend to get attached as well. Because, for example,
Yeah.
you're expecting a relationship after 5 dates. And so you get attached because, like, oh my gosh, it's almost the 5th date. Is he going to ask me to be his girlfriend now? Like, it's hard. Because what if the other person is thinking, okay, I still need a bit more time to get to know them before I,
And everyone's different. And every relationship is different too. For some
Yeah.
people, they might both fall head over heels in 5 dates, and some people might take them months.
Exactly.
And it might be 5 dates over 5 months, or it might be 5 dates in a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different. It's different. It's all different.
Yeah, so there we go. That's this was a very long episode, but I feel like we tackled a lot.
We did. I had a very interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing all of that with me.
Yeah, thank you as
I think I
well for
learned
listening.
some things myself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll be dating in the near future. I hope not. Aside
Hope
from,
not.
with you can have lots of dates with Jono and enjoy that.
Yes, I do like our dates.
I pray for your happiness forever. And
Aw, and I hope you find someone on your Tinder dates.
aw, thank you. I actually don't use Tinder, but
Oh, what do you use? Actually, that's what I didn't ask you. What do you use of the apps that you
yeah,
mentioned?
I think I mentioned this before in which episode was that? Like dating in Japan, was it? Yeah. Dating in Japan, by the way, for those who are interested, is episode 5. But
Yeah.
I am currently using Bumble most of the time. I'm actually very interested in using Hinge, but it's not available in Japan. Like you
Gotcha.
can't download it at all.
Oh.
I used Tinder 4 years ago.
Okay.
I'm
Interesting.
not using it anymore because it's I feel like the tendency in Japan, at least from what I've experienced, I can't say the same for everyone else, but it seems like a lot of people are looking for more casual relationships on Tinder and not serious
Right.
relationships. So yeah, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode, Emily, and everyone who is listening. And yeah, let me know if you have any other questions that we weren't able to tackle. Maybe I can answer them in a different episode.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you so
Thanks,
much,
guys.
and see you again next time. Bye bye.